Hey, welcome to Assemble AI. Sam here with Mac, and we will talk about the global AI regulatory chessboard, like how different regions approach AI governance.
Today, we are zooming out to look at the global landscape of AI regulation. The UE has its AI Act, which we already talked about in our previous episodes, AI Act, and also the data governance. But that's just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
That's correct. Like different regions are taking fundamentally different approaches when it comes to putting guardrails on AI implementations. And it's just not details, it's comparing visions of technology and society in different regions, different countries, and such. So, Mac, why don't you just start with the United States and see what's the American approach here? What do you think?
Yeah, yeah, and that's actually that's brings my attention here because I know that we did one entire episode on just EU Act on AI, but this is the episode that we are going to talk about the American approach. So especially the US is taking a sectoral approach, right? I mean, different agencies regulate AI in their domains. FDA for medical AI, FTC for consumer protection,
Correct.
EEOC for employment, plus
Mm-hmm.
executive orders and state initiatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
So flexibility, but also fragmentation. So companies face different requirements across states and sectors with no single source of truth.
Yeah, I know. And it's kind of like started with Biden's executive order on AI,
Absolutely.
right? Which was a major step. Like it was just kind of not only just laid the foundation for establishing safety standards for powerful models, but it also making sure the companies develop systems that pose national security risk must share safety tests with government. We have seen that companies like Palantir who are working now, with the US because they have US contracts with Pentagon and stuff, are following those kind of guardrails. And it also addresses critical infrastructure, bias, privacy. And these are all comprehensive guardrails that the government is making sure that they set the standard for the organizations. And it's just more of like it's just like a very comprehensive approach, like without forcing a law, you're making sure all the companies follow that. I want to ask you, Mac, China's approach, as we know, is a little different. Okay, so what do you think about that?
China's approach is like radically different as compared to United States and as compared to EU. So specific regulations for different AI applications,
Hmm.
algorithm recommendations, deepfakes, generative AI. So the philosophy is state oversight aligned with social values. So they just not only do their regulations only for the state level or the federal level, they also do framework level as well. Any applications that users is going to use, like they will get the regulations. So it's way more stricter.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, but if I think about that, how does it work in practice, right? Like we generative
Right.
AI regulations require companies to register before deploying chatbots. They also maybe must ensure the content doesn't violate Chinese law or socialist values. And I believe that heavy requirements around data security and content filtering are still underway in China, which making sure that they're also following the rules and stuff, right? Because we talked about it in our one of our previous episodes, and I would definitely encourage our listeners to listen to the episode 5 of season 3, where we focused on protecting how you actually focused on protecting individual rights. But here I feel like the China kind of focuses on social stability and state security, right? Now, thinking from that perspective, what do you think, Mac? What are the guardrails or compliance that UK, Canada, or even Singapore trying to impose?
Absolutely. Great questions. UK is taking a somewhere a middle path. So
Hmm.
pro innovation approach using existing regulators with coordinated AI principles. Canada has proposed AIDA, closer to the EU model. And Singapore, on the other hand, has more voluntary frameworks with incentives. If there are any incentives, reputational benefits, market access, government contracts. But without the enforcement, they rely on good faith.
What about the global south? Do you think are they being left out in terms of getting on these AI Act bandwagons with other countries?
Yeah, that's actually a very critical point. Much regulation happens in the wealthy democracies, as you know,
Mhm,
because the extreme south, they are not more enthusiast countries, several of them. And although that AI impacts everyone, so they are typically not the front leader for the
mhm,
for the AI implementations. And there is a risk of regulatory colonialism where
mhm.
Brussels or Washington rules get imposed globally because of their transparency and because of their logical structure.
Yeah. And I think we started seeing the same trend in the emerging economies as well, like in some of the BRICS countries. Like
Right.
we're seeing regional initiatives like African Union developing AI strategies, Brazil also working on regulation.
Right.
India taking some sort of light touch approach, but they're also making sure that their innovation follows certain guardrails and compliance. Because I think India's more focus is trying to attract investment while protecting citizens from any pitfalls of AI, and there are certain downsides of that technology. So now, Mac, is regulatory convergence happening, or are we just fragmenting? And every countries are just
Right.
following their own pathways.
So in my opinion, that we are doing both. We are seeing convergence around the principles, transparency, accountability, fairness. These appear across frameworks, but implementation varies widely. The reason is that why implementation varies widely, because you see there are a lot of differences the way South Asian country implement AI
Mhm.
and the way European Union implementing AI and the way United States of America they are implementing AI. I mean, there are, if you see there is a first, I mean,
Yeah,
it
there's
could,
a pattern there.
yeah, I mean, and there could be multiple reasons, like what we already talked about. There are
Mhm.
multiple, I mean, it could be, like varies about the regulations level. It could be a cultural aspect. It is about the principles and, and also like as we talked about earlier, how they are enforcing the regulations, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. And we started seeing the same trend in terms of international organizations, right? Like UNESCO has ethics recommendations, and uh, OECD has principles adopted by 40 plus countries. Not binding, but they create shared language and foundation.
Right.
We also start seeing some flashpoint like content moderation. Like, for example, the EU wants illegal content removed quickly. Some countries want criticism of government removed. U.S. has First Amendment policy protections as well, right, to safeguard their citizens from any pitfalls of AI. So all expect AI companies to moderate, but harmful varies drastically. So at the end of the day, it's just like I would say the data localization is another, right? So what do you think about like the data localization? And if I shift that topic a little bit, that because data is scattered everywhere in the world, depending upon the countries or the companies you're working with, you never know where your data is being localized. So how do we make sure that our data is being safeguarded, implement similar sort of laws and rules?
Yeah, like um I mean, it can vary for multiple countries, especially countries like China, Russia, Indonesia. They
Hmm.
require data stored locally. And this creates challenges for AI companies that benefit from large, diverse data sets. And it will become harder to train the global models. The problem is that about the technical standards, right? Because
Hmm.
if the data stored locally, what about the standards? So
Sure.
then ISO, IEE, NIST developing standards are coming into picture for bias testing, robustness, documentation. But standards only work that if widely adopted. They can be weaponized. Who said standards matters geopolitically? So that's a point of discussion. right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's kind of course, if we see that the AI companies they're kind of only operating in certain markets, which already started happening. Like many Chinese AI companies don't operate in the West, and vice versa. Western
Right.
companies are wary of China, and that trend might intensify, right? So that's kind of concerning from global cooperation standpoint. What do you think, like, if you are an individual, like an AI researcher, or you have your own AI startup building AI products? So, what advice would you give to that person to kind of navigating through all these obstacles or all these policies and stuff governed by separate countries?
So I would say design for the most stringent requirements you expect. Build in privacy, transparency, accountability from the start. Stay flexible. Regulations evolve. And remember that if you want EU customers, you comply with EU rules, regardless
Hmm.
of where you are best. Now, here is the thing. I would first suggest that you need to think in two ways approach. First, where you best and who will be your target audience. If you are best in US and you are building an AI product only based on US customers, then I would say first to build your product just to get that market validation, and just for now just focus on E- US regulations. You might not need to think too much about what a South Asian country is doing or what EU is doing. But but you are already in the growth stage and your product now you are trying to sell in EU, you are targeting EU customers as well, then definitely you should also comply with the EU rules and regulations, even though you are residing in US, and it just vice versa. So
Correct.
that's the way I think it. But you definitely maintain a standard. Now, some of the examples that which we give, like China, maybe Russia, Indonesia, I don't think like majority of other Western countries they exactly follow the same like this, because as you mentioned earlier, localization. I don't think that localizations is being followed by too much in US and EU. So I think US and EU are very global. They are following very global standard. So I think someone, if he's starting out, I think they can absolutely, like just have that knowledge, like what is US policies and standards is all about. Same for EU as well. So I think
Yep.
that's good starting point.
Yep. Totally agree. So, the big takeaway from this episode is AI regulation is complex, it's evolving, and it's geopolitically changed a lot in the last couple of years.
Right.
These choices shape what gets built, how it works, who benefits, and what risk we accept. Thanks for tuning into this episode presented by Inside Assemble AI. If you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, make sure to give us a rating on Spotify. And also, we do have a Substack newsletter. So make sure that you subscribe to it and read our newsletter and provide feedback so we can get better every day. In our next episode, we will cover the future of AI policy. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, stay curious and build responsibly. Thank you.